I am Jonas Peterson with Symphonic Planet. In this video, I want to give you a little tour through our new virtual instrument, the singing ringing tree. First of all, you need the full version of Native Instruments Kontakt for this to work. It's just one instrument. I'm going to open it up. This is how it looks. I'm just going to start right with these down here. You've got 3 pages, one with location and one with history. Let's just see what happens here. Location. So this is kind of our unique feature that we include in all of our plugins. You can basically travel to the place where we sampled this instrument. So this one is in Europe, in England, in pretty much far north England. And you can zoom in all the way to the instrument, all the way. Here you go. You can zoom back out. So yeah, you see it was in the winter where we sampled that. It was great because there wasn't that much wind going on. And so the little wind was just enough to get all these tubes sampled individually. Otherwise, it would have been a mess. I had to stick the microphone into each one of these tubes to actually hear the sound of this instrument. And it worked quite well. So we sampled all that and brought it back to our studio in Los Angeles. And then here we have another page. That's the history of the instrument a little bit. So yeah, let's get back to our instrument. Oh yeah, here we have the coordinates, so you can travel to the place yourself and listen. Okay, so let's look at the functions here. Each one of our virtual instruments comes in a similar layout. You have the main sound on the left side. It's called the ringing tree in this case. Then in the middle, you have SPO strings. So that's actually a string orchestra that's doubling the main sound. And then the third section is a space, which is a reverb, where we have different rooms from our travels around the world that, different sizes and have all certain unique characters that we included in this plugin. Okay, so let me just play you how it sounds. Everything is turned off except the main sound, the ringing tree, and then we'll just go through the functions. So this is the sound of the singing ringing tree. So yeah, this sound is literally wind blowing through the steel pipes, and that's how it sounds. And the steel pipes have different lengths, so you get different pitches, right? So if I play higher, the tubes are smaller, so you get higher pitches, and then you can go really low because of these really long tubes, and you get really low bass drones. It's pretty amazing. You can see down here the range. So it doesn't go very high. It goes up to here. Okay, so let's go through the functions. The first thing here is pretty obvious. You can dial in the wind. Obviously, the sound is created by wind, but you don't actually hear a lot of the wind when you just play it like this. But we recorded the wind as well, so you can mix it in. It's almost like a reverse low-pass filter. Yeah, so that's quite fun. The next thing we have is minus octave and plus octaves. I always like to include that. It's basically you can mix in a lower octave or a higher octave. It gives you really quickly, you can just create powerful sounding pads, out of this just original, easy, simple sound. So it gets quite musical pretty quickly, just because you already have 3 octaves playing at the same time. And obviously, so if you're really low already here, and then you're mixing in an octave, it's just, very, very nice, big dark, low cinematic. Okay, let's go over to the right here, to the space. So these are reverbs that we sampled on our trips around the world. We have a 14th century baptistery in Pisa. This is one of my favorite reverbs in the world. I'm going to show you how it sounds, and then you understand why. It's famous for its reverb. It's a tourist attraction. It's a 12-second long reverb. Down here, these are the sends. So basically, whatever you have here, you can send to whatever reverb you choose to use with these sends here. You know what I mean? It's just insane. Okay, then we have a rainforest music house in Malaysia that we recorded in Borneo in the jungle. Smaller, everything out of wood. It sounds very wooden. It's very nice. A church in England on a trip to the Singing Ringing Tree. Also quite nice reverb, not too long, sounds very natural. Next one, Alonzo Russell home in Utah, USA. Yeah, we like ghost towns. This is an empty house in a ghost town in Utah. Yeah, also very interesting. Another abandoned building in Italy. Sounds very different. That's Italy for you. There are tons of abandoned building everywhere when you travel through Italy. So yeah, this one sounded amazing. So we just took impulse responses and included them in these sample libraries. Let me show you without. And with. Yeah, very nice. And the last one, Clear Lake Studio A in North Hollywood. That's the studio here in Los Angeles that we record our strings in, that you will hear later. You know, it's just a nice sounding room, not too big. Yeah, this is great because if you want to match the sound with the strings here, you can use this room because it's the same room where they've been recorded in. So it's nice to have. Okay, so the next part, the middle section here, it's called SPO strings, Symphonic Planet Orchestra strings. We do record with real string players in a nice sounding room here in Los Angeles on a quite regular basis for clients, for our own music, etc. So we decided to include them in our sample libraries as well. But these strings they're not just playing anything, they're playing what's called collegno tratto, which means they're turning their bow around, so the string players don't play their instruments with the hair on the string, but with the wood on the string. And it gives it a strange, eerie, uncontrollable sound. It sounds very different than a normal string orchestra, and that's what we included here. So let me show you what happens when you mix them in. Okay, strings only. Mixed with the Singing Ringing Tree. And as you can hear, there are a lot of strange artifacts going on because of this playing technique. So we included a low-pass filter here, so you can just make it more like a pleasant, maybe synth sound or something. Yeah, and one thing I always like to include is similar to here, basically an octave slider where you can dial in a lower octave. But in this case, it's actually recorded with a double bass. So let me show you how that sounds. Mix it in with the singing ringing tree. Yeah. And here we also have a reverb send, so you can send the strings into these rooms as well. Let me show you. Mute the ringing tree. Yeah, it's just, these rooms are just amazing. The nice thing about these sends is that they're pre-fader, so you can send something to one of these rooms without having to actually turn on the actual signal. So I can send this high octave to this church in England. And I always love to do this, to mix this in with the original dry signal. Basically, I have the original dry signal without any reverb, but then the high octaves, I don't use any of the original signal. I only use the reverb and send it to the church. So you get this interesting kind of... Doesn't it sound like someone is singing in the background? I always find this really fascinating because you can really, I mean, it's called the singing ringing tree. You can really make it sing by just sending the high octave to these reverbs. And the same thing you can do with the low octave, which is also really quite interesting, because basically you'd use the original, the dry signal like this, and then you mix in an octave lower, but just as reverb. You know what I mean? It's just amazing. And then we have ADSR here, so you can actually use the sound a little bit more like a synth. So, for example, you know. As you can see, there are a lot of options here, even though it's just a very simple, naturally occurring sound. You know, you can manipulate it in many ways and use it almost more like a synth. You know, you can create pads and lots of interesting things, you know, if you combine it with these reverbs and with these strings. And I think that's really powerful. I always like using, you know, real sounds with the character as a basis for my production instead of, you know, just a synth sound that just sounds kind of boring from the get-go. So you have to do a lot of stuff to make it interesting. Whereas this sound already sounds interesting out of the box, you know? So that's the singing ringing tree. Thank you for joining me on this little journey to the north of England, into the cold, listening to the wind blowing through these steel pipes. I hope to see you soon on another one of these little plug-in journeys.